Do you know what I've just seen? There is there's that song, "There's a bluebird on my shoulder." I have a Weimar on his head, on on my shoulder.
3, 2, 1.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Not Us podcast, hosted by two crazy sisters, myself, Angela, and that hottie over there, my sister, Samantha, where we talk about change, choices, and we celebrate all those messy bits in between.
And while we'll accept being crazy, we are not licensed doctors, gurus, therapists, or witches. The opinions and stories shared in this episode are for entertainment only, our own, subjected to change, and it's likely that we'll swear. Remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe.
All right. I think this episode's requiring us to start with the tequila because was it like the first episode we recorded ever?
It was.
And
We've tried to, and we've scheduled recording this a couple of times. So we need the tequila to speak easy.
just speak easy and let's try it again.
Loose lips. Ching.
Loose lips. Cheers.
Okay. So what is the topic and discussion today? Labels and identity.
You know, I remember when we first started creating Not Us, and you put the very first social media posts on. You created some really great ones about us breaking out of boxes, just smashing any kind of identity. And that's really where we started. So one of the reasons that we were hesitant in doing this episode was we realized that labels and boxes and identities and that conversation overarches everything that Not Us podcast is based on, because that is essentially how you and I show up. We don't like being boxed. We, in fact, probably defy any labels or boxes. And we continually celebrate and allow ourselves to morph and change our identities as we grow and change in life. So to pull this all into 1 hour less than is quite a feat for us. So let's go. Let's see where that takes us.
Okay. Maybe we should just start with the difference between identity and labels. And I think you had a really good point of view in terms of how you distinguish the two.
Yes. So in researching it a little bit more, the position is that a label is often something that is put on you, someone else's view of you, whereas an identity is often something we identify with. And so that it can move and shift and change. When you're a young child, you may identify with your family and your friends and your environment. And so that changes when you become a teenager, student, adult, married, depending on where you're living, changed hemispheres, etc. So your identity can shift and change. And like we've spoken about in previous episodes, where if your job changes, how do you identify? So it's a subtle difference, but the one is more likely to be fixed and put on you by other people, whereas identity can have a little bit more flexibility. So that's very broad, but that would be one of the suggestions.
Yeah, it's interesting for me because we challenge the labels that are placed on us. And it's not that we go around and live our lives trying to challenge the labels. It's just a case of we tend to be a little bit more conscious of the labels that people place on me, because I don't know, sometimes I don't know whether those labels are actually even part of my identity. And I'll give you a good example. Last year, I was at a friend's anniversary celebration and everyone was being introduced, and I was introduced as the lesbian neighbor. And it's not about walking away from my sexuality, but I don't identify as a lesbian, and I never have. And later in conversation, I poked fun at, well, even on the evening, I was like, well, you should have told me I was the token. I would have worn my uniform or made sure that the identity was really easy to see. So it wasn't something that that offends me, but it was something that made me think, but hold on, it's great to introduce me and I don't mind you introducing me and I don't mind you talking about my sexuality, but it's not how I identify myself.
Hmm.
And that was one of the departure points for our previous recording of this particular episode. But since then, I tried to understand myself a little bit more, especially with my identity changing as a result of circumstances in life and also choice. Choice. Do I want to resist the change and stick to the identity that I know so well? Or am I open to different experiences that are going to shift and change and challenge my beliefs, my thoughts, my identities and awarenesses? So it's an interesting topic for me in
Hmm.
terms of where I find myself in my life.
Yeah, I really identify. Now I'm going to see that word everywhere with what you're saying. And since you've spoken about sexuality as one of those areas, and it is a big one, people like to put you in a box. You're either straight or gay or something else. People don't like the nuances. You're either this or you're that. And I certainly am someone who has never been this or that. Growing up, it was really interesting for someone who grew up in apartheid South Africa. I didn't really see color. Of course, I could see color. I can see race, in inverted commas, they are, but it didn't define if I wanted them to be my friend or whether I could have a relationship with them or not. And that includes male or female. Those lines are all very blurred for me. I just connect with someone and am drawn to them. So, as we've said often, I've been married to a man, I've been married to a woman. Coming out of that, I was like, well, I've done both of those. Where am I going now? I didn't lock in any possibilities. And now my partner is a male. And people have then gone, firstly, when I was straight, that's what I was. Then suddenly I became lesbian. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize that I was that, only because I kind of like loads of things. And now, because I'm dating a man again, I'm apparently straight again. I'm like, no, I'm not any of those things. I'm someone who's drawn to a person, and that may shift and change. And so I find that labeling a little ill-informed. It used to just irritate me, but I think that's an educational piece, that life and people are not black and white.
It's interesting for me that people still need labels to engage because we are not products on a shelf in a supermarket. And so sexuality, religious beliefs, what you do, etc., is that the essence of the person? And I suppose sometimes when you are describing someone, you have to put descriptions to the individual. But it's a little bit prehistoric, or perhaps there's another word, that we are still classifying people by their sexuality or their race or what they do. And maybe this is going to tread on your territory as the family hippie. But what I do like that you often say is the essence of being. Who do you be? Not who are you or what do you do, but who are you being? And as I've grown a little bit more confidence in myself and how I want to show up in the world and how I want to experience the world, I'm more interested in the essence of the individual than gender, sexuality. And this is not about attraction. This is just about who I want to spend my time with. Who is that tribe? And I
Yeah.
understand that people need labels, but I do think that we are in a day and age where pausing to ask someone, how do you feel comfortable with me describing you? And for some people, sexuality might be important and it might be part of their identity, and being gay or straight or whatever might be important to them. And for other people, it's got nothing to do with anyone else other than the
Yeah.
person that they are physical with or people that they're physical with.
And we were having a laugh and a not laugh the other day as we were driving, talking about it's quite old fashioned to be labeling or describing people in terms of their sexuality or their race. But we just think of like, people who would be, every time you speak to them, they're like, well, my gay neighbor or my black neighbor. And you're like, oh, you mean Pete, who's been living next door to you for 40 years? Yes, I know them, but they are always described by their race or, or their sexuality, because those are so defining. I suppose it depends on which society you're growing up in as well and the culture, because it could be my Protestant neighbor or that bastard that supports Man United down the road. Oh, yes, you
Otherwise
mean
known as
Angela.
Angela.
Exactly. So I think it's like the predominant thing. But I wonder if we could change lenses and be, my neighbor who bakes the most amazing cakes, or that kind, sweet man who lives down the road.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you saying is let's just change the labels from the stuff that people might not want to have
That is offensive.
described about them to my amazing neighbor who bakes a beautiful cake. Well, what about just my neighbor Jane?
Exactly. Like what you said, if that's how Jane would like to be identified as, then there you go. On a little bit of a serious note, those identities become really tricky. If I think of career-wise, I found it incredibly confronting when I stopped performing full-time and was doing corporate work, trying to understand what my identity was and what people wanted my identity to be. I recall at the time I was doing some contract work. It was creative work in the banking sector. People would say, oh, have you heard? Angela Killian's working in a bank. People thought I was a teller. Now, that is a great job to do. But what that did to me was send me into a panic about who I needed to be and who was I becoming. And was I comfortable not being Angela, leading lady, any longer? And did that have to end there? Did me changing or diversifying in my career mean that I was no longer that? Or was it just that continues to remain part of who I am, but I also am someone who functions in a corporate world? It's like, how do you add those identities? Why I'm saying that is because I have many tools that help me to negotiate how I feel in these moments. And I have people in support structure who I feel safe with and who I can be myself with. But a lot of people don't have that. And so if they are being labeled as something and they can't keep up with that, or they don't want it, it can actually break people. It is a very serious thing when we hold people in a box and they have to stay in that box. You and I have spoken about people who are wanting to move out of relationships or marriages, but they stay for whatever reason. They will rather end their lives than not be able to please the world and stay in that box and in that label.
I just thought what you were saying was quite interesting from the perspective of how quickly a label can become our identity. And when we've cultivated a particular persona, so for you, leading lady, for another person, it might be wife or mother or whatever that might look like, and that gets challenged or we outgrow it, it is fascinating the identity shift and the internal shift that needs to happen before the external shift can happen, just in terms of making that pivot. And like you just said, sometimes the pivot is so hard psychologically to make or to let go of that label and that identity that it prevents you from actually moving into a new season or the next chapter of your life. And it's really interesting for me because we're living longer and therefore we have many chapters and many seasons. But for a lot of us, or for humans, change is tough. And the hardest part is accepting your personal change, because you're with you 24/7. And so it is interesting how quickly a label, and especially an accomplished label, like a leading lady, like a mother or a wife, it's interesting how a label can quickly become the identity, and how identity can also be really rigid and prevent you from exploring more.
Yeah. There's another angle on that that's also worth considering, and that is, as much as we are trying to keep those labels and identities flexible, I don't want it to sound like it's only a negative thing, because we do know that the sense of belonging is so important to us as humans. So studies have shown that people in communities, if they join a knitting club or church group, or what is the one that you are all crazy about? Paddle. Dear God, that's the new church. Everyone's a paddle player now. I'm not.
Everyone.
All
It
my
takes a
friends are
certain
doing it. I
skill.
need to go and try it.
It takes a certain skill. Okay.
A certain skill. But that sense of belonging, it can be life-saving for many people. That sense of community, belonging to a community. And then people really crave that label. For some people, they may desperately want to get married, and they want to be Mrs. So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so. So it's not that it has to only be negative. I think what we are trying to get to is, certainly for us, that we don't want to be locked in and feel like we can't change and move and evolve and grow and become and continue becoming in this life because of labels that are placed on us by other people or by ourselves. That's the freedom that we long for within all of these identities. I hope I speak for you accurately.
Yeah. A friend said to me the other day, and I love the saying, said, labels are for gifts under the tree.
I love that.
And that's true, but we know that's not the reality. And that's also why we're doing this podcast. It's really to celebrate the change and the choices. Well, to celebrate the choices to change and how awkward and messy that can be. And I don't think either one of us live our life trying to change for the sake of changing. We're just a little bit more open to it, and are willing and sometimes, allow life to drag us through. That's me. Angela might be more willing. I'm like, hold on to that side of the ice rink for dear life. until eventually life takes you. Willing to explore that and then go a little bit deeper and ask questions, and also allow people around us to show up differently. I mean, ask me. In the 26 years that I've known my sister, she has been many things. And in actual fact, at one stage, her name was Adishakti.
It's still my spiritual yoga Sikh name, Adishakti Kaur, which is beautiful. Adishakti, the creative energy of God. Shakti is lioness or princess. How divine is that? So I will keep my spiritual name. Thank you very much.
There we go. She's very
The
committed to it.
primal creative energy. I'm committed to it. I've had 3 names. I have my birth name. I have my name that my family gave me once I was adopted. And I have my spiritual name. I also have some other names that people like to call me, which we can't possibly put on air. There are hosts of them.
You might not identify with them at this moment.
We may get blocked on social media if we put the names that other people call me.
What's the first label you remember being given about who you are?
Shy and sweet. Yeah, I'm actually, that's the introvert extrovert in me. When I was a kid, I was quite shy. Like at nursery school, I would stay in and only speak to the teacher. And in my reports, they would say, Angela needs to spend more time engaging with other children. Or I would only hang with like someone that no one wanted to play with. So I was kind of a little bit shy. When I first started performing, they were like, you need to sing out or you're not going to keep the role. That is probably the first one. But the first one that was traumatic for me was being called fat. Someone came to see a show that I was doing and in my teenage years, and I had put on a lot of weight, and I'd had trauma in my life at the time, and that was my protection mechanism. And they said, she's got such a pretty face. It's a pity she's so fat.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. It's just the delivery. She's got such a pretty face. It's a pity she's so fat. I mean, the
Exactly.
cruelty of that.
I know. And people feel like they can just say that to young people. Anyway, I think I kept that trauma of that label for, I don't know, maybe 30 years. And no matter how lean I was, I always used to think I'm pretty, but too fat on stage.
And how do you think that shaped you? Not only the dramatic one, but even the shy and the sweet. Funny,
Yeah,
I've never been labeled sweet.
Funny that.
You know that I am sweet, actually. I'm an incredibly kind person.
Just the delivery of that. You know that I'm a sweet person.
And I would be offended if someone actually labeled me sweet. Don't you dare.
Exactly. You are kind and thoughtful and passionate. Sweet is not one. You can be very sweet, depending on your definition of what sweet is. You're thoughtful and kind and lovely.
I'll take that. Like, sweet doesn't resonate with me at all, but I think I can see you being sweet.
As a kid. No, I'm not so fucking sweet, am I?
You are. You are every animal that comes near your house.
That's right. If you have 4 legs or you're a bird, then I'm very sweet to you. Otherwise, it's questionable. But yes, anyway, how did that shape me? You know, it defined everything after that. I spent my life obsessing about my weight and how I looked. That just comes with the territory of being an actress anyway. Oh, it can. I've got friends who are immune to that, which they are just wonderful freaks of nature in the creative world. And that's often been their upbringing, in fact. So that very much defined everything. And still to today, although I have a much healthier outlook on that, if I pick up any kind of weight, I feel like a second-rate citizen. So that's something that's a continuous checking in on myself, destroying and uncreating those thoughts, be kind to myself. You know, if I'm having those thoughts, I really have to spend extra time giving myself lots of love and nurturing and care. But that was one of those things that kind of gives you some broken psychology when you're a kid. How about you, sis? We know sweet wasn't one of your words.
No, I was also very shy as a child. And even as an adult, I've had to learn to fight the comfort of standing back, being a little bit more reserved. And corporate has been good for that. And it's interesting because if we're in a group situation and no one's willing to step up, I'll just throw myself in there. But I'm quite happy to stand back if someone else is willing to lead. But of course, we also know that you've got to be a strong leader to lead me because I am stubborn. That's a label. I've often been told I'm stubborn. And it's not that I'm stubborn. I just have a different viewpoint. And I'm going to go with my viewpoint. Thank you. Because I think I know best.
Those of you who are listening to this right now, I would watch it on YouTube so you could just see my sister's facial expressions. Oh, you know what, though? I think it is true that in corporate, you have to be really assertive. Maybe for women, we're often assigned specific labels, and we've just done an episode on jobs. But if we bring that into the labeling, very often if men in the corporate world are strong and opinionated, those are the words they use. A bully and an asshole are not the words that were used. For women, if you're being assertive and direct, you are very often labeled aggressive and being a bitch. And again, it's like everything gets put in the masculine and the feminine. And that just needs to get shaken up a little bit, actually.
Yeah, I've definitely received feedback in terms of oh, but you can come across as really aggressive. And we're going to do an episode about the female-male dynamic in corporates and how challenging it is for women to be measured equally and fairly. But no one wants to be labeled aggressive because it's not praised. And that's the thing with labels is, one, there can be very different meanings from the person who is doing the labeling and the person who's receiving the labeling. Because we know that based on our backgrounds and our understanding, the same word doesn't mean the same thing to two people.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge. When we have positive feelings about certain labels, we'll lean into that. And when we have negative feelings, we'll shy away or try and change. And it's interesting how we take all of this super personally.
It's the unconscious bias that we all carry around with us, our upbringing, everything that has been implanted into our psyches, our memories, whether we are consciously aware of those or not. And as you say, what words mean. And since I communicate globally across multitudes of cultures, and I've been so aware of that in the last couple of years, it's the gift that this career has given me of exactly that. One person's definition of someone being sweet is 100% different in another language. And so we do need to be really careful. But maybe, again, as with everything, it comes back to us taking time to go inward, to check our own bias and spend time in reflection to see what comes up when we're confronted by a word. One of those words for me as a performer was nice. If you tell me I'm nice, I want to lose my mind, because nice is not impactful. I want it to have impact. I want you to move you. Tell me you hated it, you loved it, whatever. But the beigeness of nice evokes a strong emotion in me. But that's not the person who's saying it's fault. That is my own stuff to go, okay, well, how can I take the edge off of that? And that's just so we can actually live in this world, not as affected by the things, the words, those things that come to us, but that rather that we can be a little bit more steady and allow those to pass us by.
Yeah. Sis, which label has protected you? And then a follow-up to that, once you've got that answer, is, and does that label perhaps maybe cost you now? So perhaps it protected you at a certain time, and later on it's cost you, and it's fine if it doesn't.
That's actually a really good question. But what comes to my mind quickly is the word sensitive. Being labeled as sensitive as a child or as a younger person was almost insulting. It meant that I was super affected. It has connotations of being emotionally unstable and crying and not able to cope in the world. Whereas now I know that being sensitive person is my superpower. It's what made me good at my job as an actor, because I could pick up the nuances really quickly on stage and adapt. It means that I can read a room really well. It means I can sniff out danger around me really quickly. I can walk in a room and have a smell that goes, there's something's not right here. So I think that's probably the dominant one. And now only in the last few years have I discovered that I do fall into that highly sensitive person category, which is not just about being emotionally sensitive, but smells, sounds, cold weather, elements, loud noises do impact me. So my nervous system is a sensitive one, but it has protected me. It has also caused me, without the tools, to really feel everything so deeply, and that can be quite traumatic.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I think that's a good one. It's a really good one, because it can protect and it can absolutely cost if you don't have the tools to support that. I think that's the challenge of being sensitive, or the challenge of anything, and not having the right tools to balance it out, because balance is so key. And I know with myself, not because I'm trying to say me too. It's not the Me Too
Club.
episode,
Fun.
but we have a lot in common. I think it's because we're sisters. But I'm sensitive too, and I've had to put guardrails in terms of what I will have in my life and conversations. Like, please do not come to me with anything that's animal related. If I cannot solve it, it just like breaks my heart. And then it stays with me for far too long. So that's a guardrail for me. If I cannot solve it, do not bring it to me. But then I'm less sensitive in terms of people where I can give guidance and support. So just in terms of understanding my own sensitivity and what really flares me up and triggers me is super important for me. And I don't mind being called sensitive. I remember when I was in grade 4, standard 2, getting a report that said, Samantha's a sensitive person. She's able to attend to the needs and requirements of her peers. But then put the word too in front of that. Too sensitive.
What
And I'm like, really?
does that mean?
Do you want to see how insensitive I can be?
Oh my gosh.
Always
Is
up
there
for a
another?
challenge.
That's
Always
exactly
up
it.
to correct.
And some people think in terms of that, you've got to toughen people up. And so you take someone that's super sensitive and you put them in life and you basically put them through Navy SEAL training for sensitive people. It doesn't change their sensitivity. It just means that they just have to develop other skills and harden parts of themselves that actually are their superpowers. So if you've got a sensitive child or a partner, then let us know what your skills are, your suggestions are around that. We're digressing slightly, but it would be really interesting to know, or if you're someone that also is super sensitive. But sis, is there another label that you've been given other than sensitive that has defined a lot of how you show up in the world?
There are a couple that are not so nice, like being told that I don't have much of a personality. And that was something that was said to me as a young child. I just was different, quiet and introverted, which is quite normal for a child who's experiencing the world. It didn't come into the world with like an understanding of how chaotic it can sometimes be. And we had a conversation late last year where I was in floods of tears going, I know that I'm really difficult for people to like, because that's something that's just followed me. Not followed me, but it's a label that I have believed for a long time, that my personality is hard to digest. And in actual fact, I'm actually quite sensitive and very protective and not everyone's cup of tea. And that's okay, because I'm a glass of champagne.
You know what the difference is, though? It's that you are more selective about who you show yourself to, all of yourself. In fact, you would do very well in Asian culture, where when you come in, having lived and worked in Asia for many years, people seem quite cool, a little bit more aloof. They don't give you everything. And there's a whole cultural reason for that. But the flip side is once you get to know them, or once you break through that veneer, it's all kinds of sweet and kind and lovely. And so maybe you just need to move to a different culture.
I'm just Danish. It's the Danish in me. It's
That's
Scandi.
true. The Danes, that wasn't my reference, but that is exactly it. That's often the case with things that are extremely beautiful. Yeah.
Scandinavia.
My God. Anyway, that's another topic. But something that you did mention, sis, and it is an episode that we've spoken about doing in the future, and that is the language that we use, the words that we use, and how we need to shake that up a little bit in our lives. And maybe that can be an invitation for those of you who listen to think about some of the words and languaging that you're using in your life.
And it's stuff that we are consciously doing. We are conscious about the language that we use, even around ourselves, because there is always a choice of words that can be empowering or disempowering. And I've read a couple more pages of that wonderful book that we're hoping to get the author on our podcast at some point, called Who Are You Becoming by Benita Field. Do you know that the word try has the lowest vibration? And the word
Really?
promise has one of the highest vibrations.
Huh.
And so the words and the language that we use, not only spoken, but even internal, can be so empowering or disempowering. And we're just not
Well,
taught these things. I mean, of course, there's tons of information where we can educate ourselves on it, but you don't know what you don't know.
yeah. I remember when I used to teach Kundalini yoga, and a lot of the time you're spending time doing mantra meditation and learning about even, let's use a really easy one, the Om. People often hear monks and people chanting Om, which is to think it was a spiritual word. But in fact, what happens if you chant it correctly, the vibration that that word sends all the way through your system, up through your soft palate, and that vibrates into your head. The chemistry of what that does to your whole being has been quantified now. You can read it. So in fact, you're not going, you're doing and it has a whole different vibration. So I'm really excited to have that conversation with you. That'll be a really fun one to unpack a bit.
Good stuff.
Good stuff. Sis, is there anything else that you want to add to this conversation before we close off?
No.
I want to, and it's just come to me, which is why if you're watching this, my eyes have been dropping occasionally because I was quickly hunting for it because I don't want to get up and collect the book. But if you've ever read The Invitation by Uriah Mountain Dreamer, it starts off talking about, it doesn't interest me in what you do for a living. I want to know what you ache for. And if you dare to dream of meeting your heart's longing. Doesn't interest me in how old you are. I want to know if you will risk looking like a fool for love, for your dream, for the adventures of being alive. And so it continues on with all of those things. I want to know if you can be with joy, mine and your own. If you can dance with wildness and let the ecstasy fill you to the tips of your fingers and toes without cautioning us to be careful, be realistic, or remember the limitations of being human. Doesn't interest me in who you know or how you came to be here. I want to know, and it closes off with, I want to know if you can be alone with yourself and if you truly like the company you keep in the empty moments. It is a really powerful, powerful poem. And in the context of this, I don't care what your label is or your identity. But I suppose for me, in the essence is, I want to know if I can be alone with myself. Like you said, we are with ourselves 24/7. If I truly like the company that I keep in those empty moments.
Makes me think of Shania Twain's That Don't Impress Me Much.
That don't impress me much.
Not the poem. Not that the poem doesn't impress me much, but I love like your labels, your identities, your accomplishments, etc. I'm impressed by your being. Who are you being?
Who you be? Yeah.
Okay, so this was
Amen.
lunatic.
This was a great conversation. Thank you, sis.
That is the label that I label her, lunatic.
That's right.
And lunatic loudly
One
and
of
proudly.
the ones that can be on social.
Sis, I don't know if we explored labels and identities much, but our conversations are fluid. We have a theme and we see where it goes.
We hope that this contributed something to your life. For those of you, and I know because my sisters told me, who listen to this while you're in the gym, hello, we see you. For those of you who are driving in your cars listening to this, thank you very much. We hope that this contributed something, and we would love to hear from you, your thoughts on the topic. And this is where I'll go to Sam to see if she's learned her script for today.
Well, you see, in our last episode, I hit a blank and couldn't remember what the outro was. And so I was sitting here watching Angela start the outro, and then you quickly realize that maybe you don't know. You clearly are not listening to me. So
it's called a segue.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to us. We really appreciate you. We appreciate your support. If you have comments, questions, or suggestions, please email us at notuspod@gmail.com. You can follow us on our social medias, Instagram and Facebook. We won't say anything about TikTok because we're not TikTok today either. And you can watch us on YouTube or listen to us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Yay.
Remember to like, subscribe, share, and comment. Until our next episode.
Bye for now.